welcome to a special bank holiday edition of Shooting the Shit. This is our feminism and business chat. And today we are joined by a very special guest. Say hello, Annie Beals.
Hi.
Those of you who are regular viewers of Shooting the Shit will notice that Annie is not one of our regulars. Annie is actually a childhood friend of mine and Hannah's. So when we were little, our mums were best friends. They became best friends because our mum was having Hannah in the same hospital that your mum, Annie Maureen, was having your brother, Matthew. And Matthew and Hannah were born on the same day. And then they were friends until my mum died a few years ago. But we kind of grew up together, didn't we? Having those horrendous like family do's where the parents would just get completely rat-arsed and we'd be there causing absolute havoc upstairs.
And we'd always like crap for the grown-ups and try and kill them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, leaving traps for the grown-ups. God, do you remember when we put like wire across the top of the stairs and waited for somebody to fall down them?
Yeah,
that could have gone really
Fortunately,
wrong.
Yeah, I think we did rethink and take it down eventually, so nobody died. But there you go. That's how vicious we were. But anyway, we're not here today to talk about our childhood escapades. We are here today to talk about women in sport. So I must admit, I do not play a lot of sports. I have done sports in the past. I did gymnastics, I've done horse riding. I'm not a particularly sporty person though. But Hannah, you're quite sporty, aren't you? Tell the people about your sporting prowess.
I don't know that I'd say I've got prowess, but I am quite sporty. I do enjoy playing sport. I play netball, and I have just started taking Naya out to knock a ball around a tennis court. And I work out whenever I can, and have always done some sort of activity. But yeah, played netball and hockey and stuff in school, and then I've just got back into netball.
Yeah, and you were the one that everybody else used to have to run away from, basically, because their ankles were not safe with you around, were they? Especially with a hockey stick.
With a hockey stick, yeah. I was a skilled player.
Just bash. And Annie, tell us about what you do.
I've always been into sport, growing up into school and just kind of hobbies on the side. Always done a lot of sport, but more recently, while I've been out here, I actually got into arm wrestling, quite weirdly. Kind of fell into it. I didn't seek it out, but I started doing it and was introduced to it by a friend. Turned out I was pretty good at it. This was about 5 years ago. And then 2 years ago, I actually won the Canadian National Championship. So,
amazing.
And we haven't had a Nationals, unfortunately, in the last year or this year. So I'm still the champion.
Amazing. Champion. So Annie, you say you fell into it. I mean, I obviously we're friends on Facebook, and I remember you. From what I have seen of your story, you literally somebody challenged you to an arm wrestle one day and you thought, all right, go on. And then you were quite good at it. And then you started going to championships. Is that literally what happened?
Kind of, but not quite. So what really happened was friends of ours were getting married. We were at their wedding. And the groom had grown up arm wrestling. His dad was a champion. He has like 5 brothers. So they arm wrestled a lot as kids. So at the wedding reception, they whip out some arm wrestling tables, and me being competitive, and I climb a lot. And at the time I was a whitewater rafting guide. So I was like, oh, I might be good at this. So I walked over, had a go, and they were like, oh, you're pretty good. You should do something about this. And I didn't do anything until a while later, my friend kind of dragged me over to a tournament and kind of entered for me so that I would do it. And then I actually came second in that tournament, quite surprisingly to myself. And then so at that tournament, there's a very close-knit community, like where I live, in like the province of arm wrestlers, because we see the same people at all the tournaments. So a lot of the guys there, some of them had been doing it for 20, 30 years. So they were like, you should really do this. You've got talent, you should train. And so I did, and then it just went from there.
But I mean, go Go on.
And then do men and women wrestle against each other?
They can, in the sense of the reason why I have arm wrestled the men is because sometimes at the tournaments there isn't a good turnout for the women. You know, I might turn up and I might be the only woman. Or maybe there's two women, but they're in very different weight categories or something like that. So then I would enter the men's, and they would allow me to do that. I mean, they wouldn't allow the men to come and enter the women's competition. But if a woman wants to step up and enter the men's, then they will allow that.
And is that because like weight is a big advantage?
Yeah, I mean, it's separate. The men's and women's competition is separate, and it's all in weight categories. But like I said, sometimes at a smaller tournament, if there just aren't enough women, it's just to give us a chance to actually get there and be able to pull rather than just have to sit and watch. So yeah, obviously there's a difference in men and women in how we're built and strength and testosterone and all that kind of thing. So it is separated, and you don't see it happening at like a national level or anything like that. It just usually happens at a local tournament.
So what are the skills, Annie, that you need to be a good arm wrestler? Is it purely just strength that's in your arm and your shoulder, or is there some sort of skill? Because you say you tried it and you were really good at it. Is that because you have really strong arms, or is there some sort of secret skill
Honestly,
to doing it?
With arm wrestling, strength helps, right? Like in any sport, if you have some strength, it's gonna be to your benefit. And I do have good upper body strength, but there's a lot of technique involved in it, that the technique is what is really going to help you progress. So you might be a little bit ahead of, say, 5 random people who start arm wrestling if you have good strength, but the technique is what is really going to make you progress and make you like step into that elite level. There's a lot of small little nuances that as time goes on, the more and more you do it, the more you learn, and that's what really made me stick with arm wrestling. It feels good to win at the beginning when you don't really know what you're doing and that kind of thing. But once I started to learn it, I kind of started to understand how much technique there is involved with it, and that's what I really enjoy about it.
Rachel's frozen. So do you find that when you're pitted against men, you're pitted against, so like they kind of pick the weight, so you're of a similar weight as a man?
Yeah, I would have to, and there isn't always, usually if I'm going to go into the men's tournament, which I don't do often, but I have done a couple of times, I might have to step up. I'm in the kind of light to middleweight women's, so there isn't necessarily a men's category at every tournament that would be what my weight is, just because it would have to be a lightweight men's category, and there might not be any men at that weight. So maybe when I have done it, I've had to step up to like the next one, but it doesn't really bother me.
Yeah,
because it's like going in, at that point, I just see it as practice when I'm doing that, because I have nothing to lose at that point. So.
Yeah. So then how have like your friends and family, and especially like we should say you're in Canada, and so like how have kind of friends and family reacted to you saying, I'm going to be an arm wrestler when I grow up? Amazingly.
Everyone is super supportive and really just kind of excited for me, and just happy for me, really. Everyone like at the beginning, and even now it's a bit of a shock. Or even if I'm telling like new people that I meet, they're like, "What? You're an arm wrestler?" I mean, most people don't even know that it's a competitive sport, more than just arm wrestling someone in the pub or something, So once they find that out, and then once I talk to them about it, they're like really excited about it.
Yeah, I had no idea that it was a competitive sport. And I know I've not seen you probably since I got married. And you know, you're not like a big woman, are you? You know, you're slender, you're not particularly tall. So it does, like, you know, when you think, well, particularly when I think about an arm wrestler, I would imagine, you know, someone built and stocky, and you just don't fit into that image.
Yeah, I mean, that's your stereotypical, like, you know, that's what I would have thought too, right? But like I said, because there's weight categories, I mean, at a national and like even international level, there's even women much smaller than me doing it, you know. But and then on the other spectrum, there are those bigger, more macho-looking guys, right? There is that like more stereotypical view, and they exist and they do arm wrestle, but then so do the smaller people. So.
Annie, I'd like to know, is there kind of cross-pollination between arm wrestlers? Because when just as Hannah's just said there, when you think of an arm wrestler, I tend to think a little bit probably of like women who are doing bodybuilding, who are quite hench. Is there a kind of typical woman who goes into it, and will they likely be doing other sports? Because like you said, you do rock climbing, you do kind of whitewater rafting, you're very outdoorsy sporty, aren't you? But not necessarily, you know, built like a brick shithouse. So who do you encounter when you're at these competitions?
Honestly, there's all types of women doing it. I can't say, oh, there's a particular type of woman. Honestly, if I think of the people that I know within Alberta, so like the province that I live in, there's every woman there. There's myself, you know, I'm not. I do love sports and I love to be outside, and but I'm not, you know, some super hench woman. But there's people who love to bodybuild who are doing it, and then there's the other end of the spectrum of, you know, people who would just be, I don't know, out playing football or something, and they're having a go. So there's a whole spectrum of people.
Hannah, what type? Sorry, Hannah, who goes to your netball? What are the women like who are your netball team?
Just massively varied. Some people just play netball, and not everyone is the same sort of shape. Some people play it 5 nights a week and absolutely fucking love it. Some people, you know, like me, just play it once a week just because it's more fun than, you know, working out at home or whatever. Yeah, and all ages, all shapes, all fitness abilities. You know, most people that do it have got some sort of fitness level, because I think you have to be fairly into something to want to go and haul your ass out and play netball every week. So yeah, but it's just all different sorts of women.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because I would think they would tend to be, you know, women who are also maybe playing football or maybe playing volleyball or, you know, some sort of other team sports. And then you absolutely do. You get this kind of stereotype in your head of what these women that do that are going to look like. And it's cracking. I mean, the whole thing about it, you might not have seen this, Annie, but we have a campaign in the UK called This Girl Can, and it was started by, I think, Sports England a few years ago, and they run adverts on the telly basically encouraging women to get into sports. And their whole thing is that there are women of all ages, all shapes and sizes, all colours, you know, women who are on their period, women who've got hairy legs, and it's just basically, you know, get out there and play sports. And that's exactly what it's trying to tackle. It's trying to tackle that stereotype that we have in our head of, oh, well, if they're a sporty woman, they're probably going to be a little bit macho and built like a brick shit house and blah, blah. And it's
all the time. Yeah, like when you introduced me then and you said you're sporty, I thought, am I? Like, I don't think like I don't look sporty. I'm not going to 6-pack unless it's like a 6-pack of buns. I've got like, you know, I'm just not a sporty looking person. I don't wear sportswear. I don't wear athleisure. I won't be fucking seen dead in trainers unless I was actually running. So I think like there is this stereotype about sporty women, and they're always a little bit, you know, the stereotype is often that 1, you're going to be really fucking skinny, and 2, you're going to be a bit like driven and demanding and a bit, you know, like if you, especially like at Annie's level of sport where like you're really fucking good at it, I guess there's this stereotype that you are going to be, you know, just a difficult woman.
And I think the thing is, though, I mean, to some extent, and, you know, I don't mean this with any kind of malice whatsoever, but you do fit a little bit. Because when I did find out, Annie, that you were doing arm wrestling, and at first I thought, what? like, where the fuck did that come from? But then I thought about it, and I was like, oh no, well, she climbs mountains and she goes down whitewater. I mean, you specifically went out to Canada in order to follow that career, didn't you? To become a kind of outdoorsy, sporty person and teach it. And so then I was like, oh no, that makes sense actually. Yeah, no, she is quite a sporty person. And you're right, Hannah. It's stereotyping, isn't it? It's absolutely stereotyping. Do you find, Annie, that a lot of the women who you do encounter, will they be doing lots of other types of sports? Will they be sporty women, or do some of them, they'll do an arm wrestling competition and then they'll spend the rest of the month sat on the sofa eating burgers? Like, is there that real range?
Yes and no. For the tournaments at the local level, we do try and like encourage new women to come and enter and have a go, because there's always an amateur level tournament and a pro level tournament. So for amateur level, anybody can come up and enter. So if there happens to be a woman who's come along to watch someone else, then she can come and enter. But in the pro level, that's where you see those women, and they're not just arm wrestling once a month. In the pro level, there's nobody arm wrestling once a month and then sitting on the couch for the rest of the time. They take it very seriously, and they're training multiple times a week. They're training on their own at home. They're training with a team, and it's taken very seriously, which I think is part of the stereotype for arm wrestling, that it's not serious. It's a bit of a laugh and it's a fun thing because it's something that we all did at school, and you do it with your mates in the back garden, and it's like that quick little competition that you have between your friends, and it's fun. But then at that pro level, it's very, very serious, and those people are full-on athletes. They're not doing it once a month or whatever.
I wanted to ask you about this actually, because you're absolutely right. Arm wrestling has it's a little bit like darts, isn't it? It's a little bit like one of those sports that you can do whilst you're all down the pub having a pint. And it's got that kind of, impression about it that it's a little bit, it's not a real sport, it's not a proper sport. Yeah. So do you find that, I mean, I don't know how, if you're doing an arm wrestling tournament, are there other sports going on around you? Do you ever find that, people who are doing other sports, they look down on you and they're a bit like, well, what you're doing, it's not proper, is it? Have you ever encountered that attitude?
I don't think they look down on it. I just don't think it enters into their head that it's a proper sport. So I don't think they look at it and go, oh no, they're just having a laugh. They're just like, oh, I didn't even realize it existed as a sport. Which is one of the things that arm wrestling as a sport as a whole is trying to do, is to bring it into that arena where it is recognized against other like power sports, like powerlifting, weightlifting and all that kind of thing, that it is a bona fide sport, and it's not just people getting together and having a laugh.
Well, exactly, because as you just said, it requires a level of skill, and it's the same with weightlifting or any of those things. Yes, of course they require strength, but if you don't do it in the right way, you're not gonna make any progress at it. You're going to injure yourself amongst anything else. So is it a sport? I don't know. I'm not well up on the Olympics. Is it a sport that goes to the Olympics? Is it well recognized? Are there international tournaments and things like that?
There are international tournaments. So there is there's World Championships, which I did so in 2019 when I won the nationals, I qualified for the World Championships, and I did go to them. So they were in Romania. So I went to Romania and I placed 9th in the world at those. Thank you. So there are world level tournaments, and they're amazingly produced compared to what we do at a local level. So it's great to experience something like that. It isn't in the Olympics at the moment, but there is a committee that are trying to get it into the Olympics.
Yeah. And so when you were at the kind of on the world stage, did you ever feel that there was a difference between the men and the way that the men and the women were treated?
I think The only, like, when I'm there, like in person, I don't necessarily feel treated differently. It's just I feel the women's tournament doesn't necessarily get as much media attention as the men. So like in person, I'm not looked down on. I don't feel like, you know, that they don't care about me as a woman arm wrestling as much as the guys, because like I said, there's that, the community there is it's so welcoming, and everybody is out there supporting everybody else. But the women's competition is drastically smaller than the men's. I think because it's seen as this macho sport where, like Rachel said, you know, like we imagine, you know, these women are maybe quite butch and really muscly, and most women don't want to look like that. You know, they don't want to necessarily even appear to be strong physically. So it's hard to get women into the sport for that reason. Because they don't, you know, they don't want to have really big muscles because they don't want to look manly. I think that's how it's treated differently, is that, you know, because it's so much smaller, like the women's competition compared to the men, that it just doesn't get as much attention.
So that is the same for everybody there. So this is, you know, generally I'd like us to come on and talk a little bit more about kind of the disparity between men's sport and women's sports, which, you know, it's glaringly obvious to anybody with two eyes, the difference in that. But I was listening to, I went to a Seroptimist talk a few years ago, and one of the ladies who was talking to us, she was one of the first players for Preston North End women's team. And bear with me, I will get to a point here. But the Preston North End women's team was one of the most powerful football teams in the world before the Second World War, and they went absolutely everywhere. They were semi-professional. They had more money than the men's team. You know, she showed us photographs of the ground from the 1930s, and she showed us photographs of the men's FA Cup final and the women's FA Cup final, and there were, you know, a few hundred people watching the men's, and there were hundreds of thousands of people watching the women's, and it was massive. And it was only because of when the Second World War happened, and when all the men came back, the FA said, well, hang on a minute, we need something for these men to do, and, you know, they've all been at war, and we need to give them a helping hand. So it completely illegalized, that's not a word, is it made
legitimized?
No, well, no, the opposite. They made it illegal for women to play professional football. And so the men's team got all the money, it got all the advertising, it got all the promotion, and it's become what the FA Cup is now, which is, you know, an absolute money-making cash cow phenomenon. And the women's football was completely relegated, and it was purely because of that, because they all wanted to give the men a bit of something to do on a Saturday after the war. But, you know, it was fascinating listening to her story of how popular women's sport had been. And that has happened in pretty much every single sport. Either it started off where women were thought, well, you know, they can't play sports because it's going to damage their wombs, and, you know, they won't be able to have babies if we've got women running around playing sports. And they came up with all of this pseudoscience to kind of back this up. Or they just thought, oh, we can make more money off men, or there are more men, or whatever, and went that way. And so women's sport entirely has been sidelined. Now, I was reading an article just before about how the last 10 years has seen phenomenal advances in women's sport. So for the first time, we've got women having professional contracts to play rugby union and to play football, and for golf and cricket and all the rest of it. But still, you know, the men's FA Cup final, men's finals of sports were pulling phenomenal amounts of money in sponsorship, phenomenal amounts of television viewers, and the women's just gets completely relegated. I was doing, in fact, a search just before we came on. I searched for women in sport on Google, a normal search, and the most asked questions that came up were, what do women in sport do? Are women interested in sport? And what sport can girls play? And that is in 2021 that those are still the most commonly asked questions, which is just fucking phenomenal, isn't it? So, Annie, after all of that rambling, this is my question.
Has anyone soliloquy?
No, sorry. Has anyone ever said to you, or have you ever kind of got the impression from somebody that you shouldn't be doing it because it's not a very feminine thing to do? You know, it's a bit of a manly thing. Maybe you should be doing some sewing or something.
No, I've never, like, on a personal level, no one has ever said, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. I think like they've been the opposite of that, honestly. Men and women are both really supportive and really happy for me with what I'm doing. The problem comes with actually recruiting more women. So that's where what you're saying comes in, because that's what they see, you know, like, can women play sport? And we're laughing at that. And it's like, what sport can women play? But then that is the mindset of a lot of women, because that's how it's portrayed in the media. And that's what they see when they search on Google. So then they think, oh, I shouldn't be playing sport. And, you know, maybe I can only play a sport for a girl. So then it puts them off. So that's where the problem comes in, is to actually, you know, get more women into the sport is really difficult, especially when it is a sport that is typically dominated by males. You know,
I think
it's really much easier to recruit people for netball because we all played netball because it's a girls' sport.
And this is what I wanted to ask Hannah, actually. Why did you pick netball? Why did you decide that you were going to go back and join a netball team?
As a grown-up?
Yeah.
Well, because I played it at school and I liked it at school and I was good at it. But, like, I was talking to my friend a few months ago about women's football, and he was like, oh, I don't watch women's football, it's rubbish, it's boring. And I was like, what? And he said the skill level is less than the women at football aren't as good as the men at football, because there's no women's, or there aren't as many girls academies. So they're not being trained from a young age. Boys, like, if you're going to get picked up to be a footballer when you're a boy, you'll get picked up at like maybe 9 or 10 or 11, and you'll get put into an academy and you'll make your way through and you'll be trained to an elite level. And women, they're not. And like, it's starting to change now, apparently. But like,
it is starting to change a little bit. I know someone whose daughter she wants to be in the England women's team, and she has been picked up by one of the few girls football teams in the country that will do exactly what you just said. But the problem is there's 2 or 3 of them, so that relies on, you know, her mum has to put aside every single weekend to drive her to wash the, you know, there's no funding or anything. So again, whilst there are some opportunities there for girls to progress into that, they still rely on you coming from quite a nice socio-economic home where your mum can afford to, or your dad can afford to take you to lots of training at the other side of the country, you know, on a regular basis. So yeah, it's still not equality, is it? Anyway, sorry.
No, and I think like facilities aren't as good as well. Like, there was that video that went viral. I think that was football, where they were playing at a tournament, and the men's training room, they had a full gym, and the women's training room was some free weights in the corner of the room. And like, there's just such a disparity, and because of that, the advertisers aren't picking it up as much, and because of that, they're not getting the funding, and it's just a vicious cycle.
Absolutely, and it comes back. But I do think it's really interesting, Hannah, that you said you chose netball because you played it at school. It was a game that you were familiar with. You had the opportunity to play it. You knew you liked it. You knew you were good at it. So you went back and did it. And I was reading an article that was saying, you know, if children at primary school try a sport, 79% of them will either play that sport into their 20s or will come back to it at some point in their lives. You know, it will become their thing. They'll identify with it. And the thing is, because we are not letting girls, you know, at Leon's school, they still split them. The girls will go off and do netball and the boys will go off and do cricket. Seriously? And it's like, how do we know that boys aren't going to want to play netball and girls don't want to play cricket? Because once you made that decision,
netball's an awesome game. Like, netball has got, well, arguably as much, if not more, skill involved than basketball, because you've got to get your feet right as well as your hands. It's such like a fast-paced, good game. But people just think, it's for girls, and it's a girls' game. It's just throwing the ball.
Well, then the boys don't want to play, right? The 10-year-old boys or 12-year-old boys don't want to play netball because it's for girls.
Yeah.
Even though if they do fun, even if they do play, it's still fun. It's still sport.
Yeah.
But like, what I'm talking about is kind of like the view of women where I am. But then, like when I went to the World Championships and I saw kind of what things are like in Europe, the top European arm wrestlers are from Russia. They're from Turkey. Well, this is all world class as well. There's a large proportion from like Kazakhstan. And in those countries, it's the opposite. So like arm wrestling is seen as something that the girls can do. And, there's high schools that they go to that are specific for arm wrestling. So they're recruited like football players. And there's a lot of women who do it.
It's interesting though, like those 3 countries that you named have got like a strong industrial like background and heritage, haven't they? Where like strength was admired in men and women. And if you were strong, then you will get on well in life because you could be forging steel and digging up coal and stuff. And
even today, when you go to the Olympics, the shot putters and the throwers and discus throwers and all the rest of it, the best ones, male or female, will be from those countries still. Strength is valued.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I think I hope that like the next generation coming up get more opportunity to touch lots of different sports and play lots of different sports. And I think like just being sporty shouldn't be something that's bad. Like when I was growing up, if you were sporty, you were butch. And I was both, unfortunately. And
but again, I mean, we grew up in the era of the Spice Girls, and you had posh Spice and baby Spice and Ginger Spice and sporty Spice, and still, like all of the other ones. Yeah, it's all right for girls to be babyish and posh, and even ginger. That's acceptable for girls these days. But girls. She was like the weird one, once because she was always in a cap of pants with her poppers down the side, and you're right, it was like she was the non-girly one. It's like, why can we not have girly and sporty? Who decided these two things were completely separate?
Patriarchy decided it.
Patriarchy, the bloody patriarchy again. So, Annie, even though you do arm wrestling, do you also like makeup and shoes and handbags and brushing your hair?
I like some of those things. I was always like, when I grew up, I actually really liked Sporty Spice. And whenever, when you were kids and you were playing the Spice Girls when you were 9 years old, I was always Sporty Spice and I was happy about it. Like, I wasn't like the last one to the party where it's like, oh, you've got to be Sporty Spice now. But that was like my pick. Maybe I just wasn't aware. I think I was just oblivious to, I guess, these stereotypes of things, because it really didn't bother me. And I'm not super girly, but I still like to dress up every now and then. I don't wear makeup. I don't really do my hair. I wear makeup maybe 3 times a year or something like that if I'm going to a wedding. But other than that, I don't. But I still am feminine.
Yes, exactly.
I was just thinking, like, I am girly.
I still like to wear dresses now and then, and maybe I'm not as feminine as some other women, but neither is everybody else. There's a whole spectrum. So I definitely wouldn't call myself butch. So,
exactly. And this is exactly it, isn't it? We've got to normalise that you can be sporty and you don't have to be labelled, oh, she's a tomboy or whatever.
Yeah.
This is it, that femininity and women come in all shapes and sizes, as do boys. And just because boys like playing netball and brushing their hair doesn't mean that, they're really girly and really feminine. It's cracking.
Exactly.
It's okay to have muscles. Like, do you remember when Madonna whipped out her guns and everyone went fucking tits and said that she was too muscular? Piss off.
Yeah.
I think that's a big problem that's the biggest problem with recruiting women into the sport that I do, is they don't want to appear manly, right? And macho.
And again, why haven't, I remember when my friend Kerry Wiggle from school, she did blacksmithing at Myerscough College for I think 2 or 3 years. and she was built like an absolute brick shithouse after she, you know, her arms were huge, but because she was doing a manual job that required a phenomenal level of skill, and that's, you know, obviously she's not obviously, but she isn't a blacksmith now, but she's got that phenomenal skill, which is at the risk of being lost. And again, everyone was like, oh, you know, yeah. How are you going to buy tops to fit you? You're not going to look nice in a nice dress if you carry on doing that. And
the thing for me, though, is that it actually had the opposite effect on me. Like, I grew up, as a kid, I started climbing. So because I was climbing regularly, I've always been quite upper body built compared to like the rest of me. And I used to hate my arms, even though they were toned. And I did have muscles. I didn't like them because I felt that they were big. And they're not big. They've never been big, like huge, but they were bigger than maybe other parts of my body in proportion, if you know what I mean. I didn't like them. But then when I started arm wrestling, I actually became like proud of them because they were they were working for me. And I was getting things out of them. And now I'm the opposite, honestly. So in like 5 years, even it's had the opposite effect on me. And my arms are bigger now than they were when I didn't like them. They're more toned and they're more muscular. But now I'm like, now I want to show them off. And now I'm proud to show them off.
Yeah, good. It's funny. It is funny, isn't it? Because I always had quite muscly arms, and I suppose they still are a bit in comparison to the rest of it. But because I rode, but Hannah and I did horse riding, and I always had really fast horses, so I was always having to pull them back. So I had really big arms, whereas Hannah always had a really lazy pony, and she was always having to kick around. So Hannah had legs like Beyonce, and it was the same. It was like whichever way round you are. You know, we were taught to feel a bit ashamed about that. And, you know, you shouldn't have muscly arms, you shouldn't have big thighs like Beyonce and all this. It's crackers.
It really is.
Anyway, time is marching on. So, Annie, how are we going to encourage girls to get into your sport? And by girls, I mean young girls in primary school, teenage girls, girls in their 20s. What do we need to do, in your opinion?
I guess.
How are we going to fix the world?
That's a big question. It comes down to breaking down those stereotypes and breaking down those barriers. And I mean, you need people who are going to advocate for the sport, right? And I think that's what we need more of. We need more people who there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of grunt work to get these girls into the sport. And if tournaments, if young girls are seeing the women not really wanting to do it, then they don't want to do it either. So it's about changing attitudes, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me as well, I think it is about getting them young, isn't it? As we've shown, if you teach children or let children play a massive variety of sports, and that's kind of athletics or game sports, doesn't matter what, but they will eventually find something that they like. Because this is the other thing as well. You get kids that go, oh, I don't like sports, I'm not sporty. When actually they don't like cricket or rugby, and that's all. Yeah. They haven't had the opportunity to try anything else, so they don't know what they like. So
they just don't even like their PE teacher. Sometimes it's just that they don't like having to put on the PE uniform. Yeah. I think like role modeling good behaviors is dead important as well. Like, show your kids that there's absolutely nothing wrong with playing sport, and it doesn't have to be your personality. You can just enjoy kicking a ball around, or whatever it is, playing catch or whatever. Just embed it. Like, absolutely nothing in the world feels as good as being fit and healthy and like taking care of your body, and it's just so important. And don't like let your kids feel like that's not something that's to be kind of strived for.
Exactly. And you don't even have to, like you said, you don't have to play a sport if you don't want to. People like, I'm not sporty, I don't play anything, but you can still enjoy working out.
Yeah.
You can still enjoy exercising. Maybe you just don't like to actually compete. And I think that people are like, oh, I'm not sporty, I don't compete in anything. But you're still active,
Yeah.
You're
I
still
mean,
looking
I
after
think that's
yourself.
the thing. That's the key, isn't it? It's about being active, because I don't play a sport. I do a little bit of Pilates, but I don't play a sport. But I have an hour outside every single day at least, where I am mucking out horses and I'm taking the wheelbarrow backwards and forwards, and I'm getting fresh air and I'm out in the open. So again, going for a walk, going for a run, all of these things are being active. So it doesn't have to be group sports or even anything constructive. It's just getting yourself moving in whatever way that is, and we've just got to let people understand that actually, even if all you do is go for a walk 20 minutes a day, that is being active, that is being sporty, that is enjoying it. Stop having these silly labels.
Yeah, definitely. I think on the This Girl Can website, there's loads of listings for local sports clubs and stuff that you can get people of all ages into.
Yeah, there are. On This Girl Can, on Sports England websites, there's loads of stuff, and stuff for kids as well, because obviously half term is coming up this week, but the summer holidays as well. There are so many free things that are going on that get children out and about and trying different things. Also, I don't know where anyone else is, but here in Lancashire, the Lancashire Adult Learning puts on free webinars for children during the half term. So even if they are locked down with COVID or they're isolating, you can get online and you can do a little bit of a PE class or a sports class and still be active and engaging with other people. So have a look wherever you are. There will be something like that on offer in every area. But yeah, just move. Just get outside and move, basically.
Shift your ass.
Shift your ass, yeah. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Annie. It's been so lovely.
Yeah, thanks,
It's
Annie.
been really nice. I really enjoyed it.
Keep winning world championship titles.
Yeah.
Right, we're back in 2 weeks. What are we talking about in 2 weeks, Hannah?
Fuck knows.
Who knows? Who knows? In the meantime, thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you soon. Way.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.